My name is Emma Sass, and today I'll be discussing the logic of cults. This slide reviews the organization of my presentation. I'll begin with the introduction to my topic and end by answering any questions you might have. The first thing I'll introduce is my topic and discuss what a cult is, the mentality of cults, and the mentality of cult leaders. This mind map gives an overall view of the topic, as well as some supporting topics that I'll discuss throughout this presentation, and some subtopics that could go along with it for further research. The first aspect that I'll discuss is the definition of a cult. According to John Joe Lalick, a cult researcher, a typical cult requires a high level of commitment from its members and maintains a strict hierarchy, separating unsuspecting supporters and recruits from the inner workings. It claims to provide answers to life's biggest questions through its doctrine, along with the required recipe for change that shapes a new member into a true believer. And most importantly, it uses both formal and informal systems of influence and control to keep members obedient with little tolerance for internal disagreement or external scrutiny. Next, I'll describe the multiple psychological perspectives of the mentality of cults and why they behave the way they do. The most common one is brainwashing. Brainwashing is defined as a broad class of intense and often coercive tactics intended to produce profound changes in attitudes, beliefs, and emotions. However, psychologists believe that the term brainwashing has too many negative connotations associated with it and not enough evidence. Instead, they affirm the term activity cycles, which involves repetition and learned behaviors. This chart is an example of some basic traits that are unhealthy and are commonly seen in leaders, individuals, and organizations. In reference to this one, it specifically is in regards to cults. The one side is completely healthy and the one side is completely unhealthy. Most people are not going to be on the ends of the spectrum. They're going to be somewhere in the middle, and then you're going to have a few intense cases that are on the unhealthy side of the spectrum. The next topic I'll discuss is the mentality of cult leaders. Cult leaders use many tactics to ensure their members willingly join and stay devoted to them. These tactics include manipulation, half-truths, reverse psychology, and circular logic. Cult leaders are also very charming and have an excellent understanding of how to read people. Their ability to read people is one of the main ways they remain successful in running their cult. Another way cult leaders remain in power for so long is by structuring their cult using a pyramid system, which is what the pyramid picture here suggests. The leaders at the top have all the knowledge, and then they dictate who has what knowledge going down, and the people who are at the very bottom of the pyramid have little to no knowledge at all. My problem statement for this project is to discover how the perspectives of chorus cult members and true believer cult members compare with the perspectives of non-group members when it comes to affiliations based on beliefs, practices, actions, and interactions. For my research on the comparison of the difference in perspectives between cult group members and non-group members, I chose to interview Dr. Stephen Hurwitz, a professor of psychology and criminal justice at Tiffin University. Dr. Hurwitz had multiple interactions with cults and cult members at both his undergraduate and graduate schools. While earning his bachelor's degree at Queens College, Dr. Hurwitz worked for the student newspaper and kept hearing about a group known as CARP. He decided to look into it and learned that CARP was actually a front for the Moonies. Then, while he was earning his master's and PhD at Syracuse University, he tried to go undercover in a cult to help get a friend out of the cult. After interviewing Dr. Hurwitz, I realized that there needed to be a difference between the members that want to be in the cults and the members that were coerced and then complied for the sake of survival. So I researched more specifics on those perspectives. I chose to use an article about Jonestown to help me with this due to the infamous nature of Jonestown and the fact that there was a multitude of data on it. These next two slides are the interview questions that I asked Dr. Hurwitz. I started with some slightly vague questions, but I also had sub-questions in case he didn't provide enough detail. After doing continued research, I was able to develop an understanding of why people join cults and how difficult it can be to escape the cult. I learned in my earlier research that the cult leaders can be persuasive and violent, and that a lot of the behavior of the cult can relate back to psychology. But in my continued research, I also learned that some of the members can be just as persuasive and violent as the cult leader, utilizing some of the same psychological tactics to control the other members. Based on this information, along with the interview data and research perspectives I gained from my interview with Dr. Hurwitz, I decided to split the perspectives into two separate sections. The first section that I'll discuss is the comparison of a non-cult member and a coerced cult member. The non-member in this comparison was Dr. Hurwitz, and the coerced member perspective was from an article detailing the perspectives from multiple members of the Jonestown cult that were able to escape. The non-member didn't believe in the teachings of the group and joined because of a friend. He was allowed to be unsupervised outside of the group and wanted to impress people by going undercover in a cult. He had no real desire to be in the group. He had a moment of doubt due to the intense pressure and persuasion tactics of the group, but due to a lack of monitoring, he was able to correct the moment of doubt and not be sucked in to the group. The coerced member believed the group was something completely different and joined for a support system and friends because they felt isolated in their own lives. They were constantly monitored by true believers and not allowed a life outside the cult to restrict access to outside knowledge. They were also constantly under pressure and persuasion tactics from the other members and the leader of the cult. The final thing with the coerced member perspective is that they were separated from family members both inside and outside the cult, and the family members that were inside the cult with them were often being coerced against them. The second section involves the comparison of coerced cult members and the true believer cult members, focusing on how different the perspectives are, even though they are both part of the same group. The perspective of the true believers came from information gained from my interview with Dr. Hurwitz and the article on Jonestowns that I referenced in the previous slide. The coerced member believed the group was something completely different, was constantly monitored by the true believers, not allowed a life outside the cult, and was constantly under pressure and persuasion tactics from the other members. They were also separated from their family members, both inside and outside the cult, knew the difference between right and wrong, but were too afraid to speak up for fear of retribution, and some of them were even held at gunpoint or beaten if they didn't agree with the leader. This example is specific to the Jonestown cult. The true believers completely believed in the teachings of the leader, and due to this, they believed that they had the right to punish those who disagreed. These people couldn't distinguish right from wrong and believed that the leader was always right. They were allowed the free reign of the cult's territory, were unsupervised, and they were allowed to supervise the other members and punish them as they wished. In response to the interview with Dr. Hurwitz and research on Jonestown, my proposed solution is to help prevent college students from being recruited into cults and to help them recover if they are recruited into cults. To do this, the solution will be twofold. The first part of my proposed solution is to have a presentation done by a guest speaker like Dr. Hurwitz, including videos done by cult experts like Dr. John Jalalik in various classes to discuss items like red flags when looking at potential groups or clubs, positive things to look for in groups or clubs, the recruitment strategies of cults, and resources to help students leave the cult or to help support them after they leave the cult. The second part of my solution is to have a student club that will serve as a support group. This support group will be made up of students dedicated to being the support system of other students. This club will have access to resources to help the students who are struggling to leave a cult or are struggling with the aftermath of leaving. This club will also create campus involvement activities that relate to raising awareness about cults and their dangers. Here are some examples of resources that will be provided by the guest speaker presentation and the support group. The first resource is from the perspective of a college student that was recruited into a cult and her struggles relating to a cult. The second resource involves multiple perspectives from different people about cults. The third resource is a website strictly dedicated to educating people about cults. And another type of resource the club might provide is contact information for therapists or the professionals that can help the students with any mental trauma they might have resulting from the cult. In conclusion, the main theme I found in my research was that cults target vulnerable people. The other common theme was that college students are extremely vulnerable due to all the stress that comes with college and new experiences. One main reason people sought out cults is due to the feelings of loneliness, isolation, and the fear of being an outcast. Having welcoming groups on campus, as well as a support club, can go a long way in helping someone realize that they aren't an outcast and they actually do have a place. which will help prevent them from seeking out cults in the first place. Another main reason people join cults is due to coercion, manipulation, and lies. Many people were coerced into joining a cult or believed it was something different entirely, and then once they were in, they couldn't get out. Raising awareness about cults is a huge step in preventing students from joining cults because it allows them the opportunity to recognize the red flags before it is too late. Are there any questions?